So, when you think about how World War II was won, your mind probably jumps straight to the battlefield, right? Daring generals, heroic soldiers, these epic, decisive battles. But what if I told you the war was actually won somewhere else entirely? What if the real secret weapon wasn't a new tank or a faster plane, but something, well, something much, much bigger? Let's dig into that.
In the huge Pacific theater, the whole conflict really boiled down to these two major industrial powers. You had the Empire of Japan, a nation that had modernized at a dizzying pace and built this absolutely formidable military. And then you had the United States, what a lot of people called the sleeping giant that had just been, violently woken up.
Okay, I want you to just hold this number in your head for a second. 88,000. That's it. No context, just the number. It seems impossibly large, doesn't it? And believe me, it is right at the very heart of the story we're telling today.
And there it is. Over the course of the entire war, the United States churned out 88,000 tanks. Japan, they produced just 2,500. That's a staggering 35-to-1 ratio. This one comparison gets right to the core of it all. The war wasn't just a clash of armies. It was a flat-out war of production.
Now, to really get how these numbers became so incredibly decisive, we have to rewind to the beginning of the war, a time when, frankly, the outlook for the Allies was just bleak. In Europe, the situation was desperate. Germany's Blitzkrieg had just steamrolled across the entire continent. By 1941, Britain was basically fighting for its life, all alone. The Axis powers looked unstoppable. And then, on December 7th, the whole conflict went truly global. The attack on Pearl Harbor absolutely crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet. In the months right after, Japan launched this lightning-fast campaign, conquering territories from the Philippines all the way to Burma. They built this huge new empire, and for a terrifying moment, it really seemed like nothing could stop them. So, how in the world did the Allies even begin to turn the tide? I mean, their backs were against the wall, and now they had to fight a war on two massive fronts, in Europe against Germany, and in the Pacific against Japan. In the Pacific, the answer was this really clever and, frankly, resource-efficient strategy that we now know as island hopping. You have to remember, the Pacific Ocean is enormous. Trying to take back every single Japanese-held island would have been a bloody, impossible nightmare. So, the Allies decided not to. So here's the game plan. It was pretty brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of these huge, costly frontal assaults, Allied forces would use their navy and air power to just bypass the most heavily defended Japanese islands, basically leaving them to wither on the vine. Then, they'd grab a nearby, less defended island, quickly build an airfield, and use that as a launch pad to, well, leapfrog to the next target, getting closer and closer to Japan. It turned the Pacific's massive distances from a problem into an advantage. But here's the thing. Even the smartest military strategy in the world needs one critical ingredient to work: an absolutely overwhelming amount of planes, ships, guns, and supplies. And that brings us to the Allies' true secret weapon, one that was forged not on any battlefield, but in the factories and on the assembly lines of the home front.
Across the Atlantic, Britain was already deep into a total mobilization of its entire society. The media called it a people's war, and that phrase really caught on. It captured this idea that victory depended on every single citizen, and in return for all that sacrifice, people expected a better, more equal society when it was all over.
I mean, we're talking about a society completely re-engineered for war. Food, clothing, fuel, all strictly rationed. The Women's Land Army was crucial in boosting food production, and people were donating their garden railings, their aluminum saucepans, literally anything metal for scrap drives. Every part of civilian life was focused on one single goal: feed the war machine. And this chart just powerfully shows you the sheer scale of that effort. In just 5 years, the chunk of Britain's economy dedicated to the war didn't just grow, it exploded. It went from just over 7% in 1938 to an incredible 55% by 1943. Think about that. More than half of the entire nation's economic output was just for fighting the war. Now, Britain's effort was absolutely monumental, no question. But it was what happened in American factories, shipyards, and assembly lines that would ultimately create an advantage that was just, well, simply insurmountable. This avalanche of production really highlights something the Axis planners had fatally underestimated: the sheer, raw power of American industry. It wasn't just about building weapons. It was about building them at a speed and on the scale that nobody had ever seen before.
So let's circle back to that number from the beginning. 88,000 American tanks versus 2,500 Japanese tanks. On the ground, this meant that for every one tank Japan could put into a battle, the US could bring almost 36. It's an almost comical imbalance.
And it wasn't just on the ground. Remember that island hopping strategy? The whole thing completely depended on controlling the skies, and American factories delivered that control in overwhelming numbers. The numbers in the air are just as stark. For every military aircraft Japan built, the United States built more than 4. This just created a massive numerical superiority for Allied pilots in almost every engagement.
But in the vastness of the Pacific, the single most important weapon of all was the aircraft carrier. These floating fortresses, these mobile airfields, they were the key to projecting power across thousands of miles of ocean, and American shipyards built them at a truly astonishing rate.
Okay, get this. Japan, a truly great naval power, built 16 carriers during the entire war. The United States built 141. This meant the U.S. Navy could lose a carrier in a tough battle and literally have several more brand new ones ready to take its place. Japan simply could not do that. This industrial advantage was strategically decisive. Now, this production advantage wasn't magic. It was all built on a foundation of raw materials. The U.S. just had access to vastly more steel for ships and tanks, way more aluminum for planes, and, this is the big one, insanely more oil to fuel the entire war machine. Japan's entire war effort was fundamentally choked by its lack of resources. This incredible mobilization didn't just win the war. It fundamentally transformed the world, creating these massive social and economic shockwaves that, honestly, we still feel to this day. Think about it. This explosion of production effectively ended the Great Depression overnight. It opened up brand new jobs for millions of women and minority groups, challenging all kinds of old social barriers. In Britain, that shared sacrifice helped create the modern welfare state. And on a global scale, it cemented the rise of the United States and the Soviet Union as the two dominant superpowers, setting the stage for the next 45 years of the Cold War.
So, the big takeaway here is that while battles are fought by soldiers, wars are often won by factories, spreadsheets, and assembly lines. It really leaves us with a final question to chew on. How did this arsenal of democracy not only win the war, but completely reshape the very fabric of the modern world we live in today?